I don't know how much backpacking you've done.
Enough to know that 100 pounds is a lot of weight. Yeah.
That is a lot of weight. The last thing I want is the unborn to look back and say, wow, what a bunch of chumps.
Hello, Boulder and the wider world. This is the Sharing Boulder podcast. My name is Philip Ogren, and for episode 14, I spoke with David Takahashi on a Zoom call to discuss his candidacy for Boulder City Council. David is running as a climate change champion and sees his role in fighting the climate crisis as a way to address the needs of an important contingent of underserved people, future unborn generations. He articulated that every decision we make as individuals or as a city need to be made in the context of the climate crisis and our urgent need to address this pressing issue. Our conversation ranged from how to make our houses and our city carbon neutral, the housing shortage, bicycle highways, resilient communities, and how church parking lots could be repurposed for affordable housing, among many other subjects. I was surprised when we realized we had been talking for over an hour because it felt like we were just getting started. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with David Takahashi. Hello, David. Welcome to Sharing Boulder. Thank you for taking time. You said that you've been really busy with City Council, so it means a lot to me that you've made time for this. I'd just be great if you introduced yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're running for City Council.
Okay, I am David Takahashi, and I am running as a climate champion. And the reason I think that is important is that the world, Ida, heat domes over Seattle. I mean, the systems are just screaming, I'm bursting at the seams. I believe that we have a past that has led us to this point, and it is no longer serving us. And we need to take action to actually change our culture to one that can create some abundance while honoring planetary limitations. So this whole idea of people, planet, and profit are really important to keep in mind. And the idea of a climate champion is that all decisions that are made need to pass through the lens of, is this serving the people, the planet, and profit? And that is not happening right now. You're going to hear a lot of talk about climate, but I am actually a doer. I'm not a talker.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm really concerned about climate, and I want to dive into that subject in a bit. But
Sure.
I was telling you just a bit ago that the name of this podcast is Sharing Boulder, and I'd like to start something new where I ask every guest on the show, how would you make Boulder more inclusive, or what should Boulder do to become more inclusive?
Okay. When you start to talk about inclusive, you start to try to identify populations that are underserved, and which, or another way to put it is, who is not in the room that needs to be in the room? Yeah. So to me, it's really simple answer, and that is those that we need to be more inclusive with are the generations that have not yet been born.
Wow.
And that at a certain point, I thought about, if I had a granddaughter sitting on my lap, looking up and saying, well, grandfather, when you knew the planet was disintegrating, well, the systems were breaking up, what did you do? And I realized, this was like 11 years ago, I realized I didn't have a very good answer.
Nothing. I mean,
Right?
I don't mean to give.
So I said, I got to work on this answer. I have to work on the answer that my granddaughter would be proud of hearing. And I have to say that last September, the granddaughter appeared. So
Congratulations.
that moment is actually going to pass at some point. And so does that?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that answer. I know for me, like I in the past, I found myself being very cynical and talking about how the world seems to be burning down, and sort of like kind of, I found myself in different conversations where I was just sort of bantering about it like it was funny, or like it was a sport to be cynical about it, instead of like actually like answering the question you just raised, like, what have you done about it? Well, I kind of realized I hadn't done anything except just sort of be cynical, and so I know that's sort of that's not what you said. You said you wanted to have
I
an
wanted
answer
to
for your
have a good
granddaughter.
answer.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's beautiful. So yeah, inclusion, that's an interesting answer, because usually we think about it in terms of the people who are present in our society,
Absolutely.
who's included and who's not, and
Who have been excluded and do not have a voice and do not have they don't have power.
Yeah. Well, I can see that we're heading towards climate change in our conversation, no matter what I ask you. So we should dive right into climate change. So as a city council person, what do you think are the top priorities for addressing the climate crisis?
Okay. Well, I believe that we've got to get off of fossil fuel, and we've got to do it as soon as we can. And that includes the indirect fossil fuel contributed by our electricity, which is going to stay on coal until 2039. And that's just way too late. But okay, so in terms of making a pledge to go carbon neutral. And what does that mean? That means that our power is coming from either sunlight hitting our roofs, or wind turning turbines, or rushing water turning turbines.
Yeah.
And then having your living situation freed from the shackles of fossil fuel. And in order to get there, the first step is to electrify. So don't worry about where the energy is coming from, but get your life off of fossil fuel. And you just kind of pick away at this. I'm not evangelical about it. I think by the year 2050, by the year 2040, we should be carbon neutral. But if we have to go to 2050, I can live with that. The reason I say this is when you get into trying to help people make the switch, what they'll say is, oh, I just put in a gas furnace. And so what you say is, okay, well, you know what? In 25 years, it's going to need to be replaced, and it could be even sooner.
Yeah.
Okay, but don't don't sweat the things until you know they need to be replaced. But when they're replaced, make the right decision.
Yeah.
So so you have, basically you've got your heating, you've got your heating water, you've got your stove and oven, you've got sometimes your dryer, you've got, what else runs on gas? Your barbecue,
Yeah.
So you just look at your life and you say, there's this interesting thing, that if you take the average American carbon usage per year, it's around 17 what they call metric tons, which looks like a modest two-story 2,000 square foot home. Okay, 17 of those is what we typically use as a developed
So
consumer.
1 metric ton is like the size of that house?
Yeah, and there's
And so
17
there's 17 of them. Okay.
Okay, if you do the math and reduce it to pounds and days, it works out to be 100 pounds a day. I don't know how much backpacking you've done.
Enough to know that 100 pounds is a lot of weight. Yeah.
That is a lot of weight. And
Yeah.
and we're strapping it on our back every day.
Yeah.
The carrying capacity of the earth, that magic, if we produced this much, the earth could actually turn it into oxygen and carbohydrates, is about 3 metric tons, which resolves to about 12 pounds. So as a backpacker, you know what 12 pounds feels like. That feels like I'm walking on air.
Yeah, I mean, it'll cut into your shoulders after a few hours, but it's a lot easier than 100 pounds, that's for sure.
I mean, 100 pounds, dude,
Yeah.
you're like on the floor and you can't get up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
that's our target. Our target is to get from 100 pounds a day down to 12.
yeah, that's right. I think that's called the 12% rule, actually.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. So I read a book on this recently, Peter Calthorpe, Urbanism in the Age of Climate Change.
Oh, wow.
And it talks about how, yeah, we need to get down to 12% carbon. But actually the way I kind of read it was, and that this may appeal to you too, but I think it would be unrealistic to hope that we can continue consuming and heating and all, using the same amount of energy, but just switch it to electric and then switch the electric to renewables.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah, there's a huge thing about what's called a negawatt. You know about a negawatt?
I know all about negawatts.
Yeah, for sure.
I also know they need to have value. Okay, so I need to be able to say, I produced 1,000 megawatts and I'd like some credit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you. The game that, like, David Adamson taught me is, number one, figure out how to use less.
Yep.
Number two, figure out how to hold on to the little you use as long as you possibly can. And three, figure out how to produce that little that you're using, that you're holding on to as long as you can.
And so the thing that comes to mind when you say that is like the heat in your house, for example.
Yeah.
You don't just let it out the front door or out a
That
squeaky.
would be silly. I mean, if you want to do that, go live in a barn.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So exactly. So so it's like there's conservation. Well, it's limiting your use, conserving what you use, and then producing whatever you need.
Yeah.
Kind of in that order, because you don't, like you say, you don't want to produce all this great energy and then leave your front door open all winter.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the way you said that reminds me of like how I think about stuff that you buy. You know, you need to really stop buying so much stuff, because there's a lot of embodied energy and environmental waste, environmental impact in that. But then the stuff that you have, like kind of like you were saying about the gas heater, you don't, I've got this sewing machine that's 80 years old. It's like built like a tank. It's really, heavy metal,
It's like an anvil.
Yeah, it's like an anvil. And I just kind of want to use that thing as long as it keeps working, because I don't want to incur the environmental cost of buying a new one. So I want to fix it and repair it.
That's called honoring the embodied energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. What next?
Yeah. Well, so I love all of that stuff, and when you start talking about reducing your energy, like I would love to just geek out about like ways that people can personally, change their habits and their lifestyles. And I think that's like I'm super interested in like lowering my carbon footprint as an individual. And so we could go in that direction, but I'm also like kind of systemically, or like as a city, what are policies that we put into place that encourage that? I mean, obviously maybe you'll just show up and be a role model, but hopefully
I think it takes more than that.
Yeah.
But we're going to stray almost immediately into the idea of sticks and carrots.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Okay. So there are ways to do this where you're wielding the stick. Yep. And sometimes that's appropriate. But there are other times that you're wielding the carrot.
Yep.
And you are
I think you wield the stick and you dangle the carrot.
That is one strategy. Okay. I believe that it is the incentives, not the penalties, that lead to the behavior we want. But on the other hand, when gas is $10 a gallon, there aren't going to be as many drivers on the road.
That's right.
Right. So yes, you're absolutely right. But so your question is, to me, what kind of incentives can we offer people that will promote the behavior that we want, right? And so one of them is to think about all of, like, your negawatt idea. Okay, what if negawatts had value, and you could say, my house produces 1,000 megawatts a day, and that actually has value, so that somebody looking for a building might say, oh, I want the one that produces the greatest number of megawatts. Okay, so then you stray into Well, what if building efficiency, which is what we're talking about, that um, using less and conserving it as long as you can is basically the formula for building efficiency. What if building efficiency was on a sticker, just like a mile per gallon sticker is on a car that you're thinking of buying, and
Yeah.
that you look at this thing and it says 1,000, right? And that number, that 1,000 is the same frame, no matter if it's a tiny home, a duplex, a triplex, a small little ranch, a McMansion, whatever, a commercial building. It was just like mile per gallon. You know what that means,
Yeah.
right? So that would be an incentive, because now your efficient house has real value. It is, you can compare directly.
Well, and I love the idea of just having the information, like it's like nutrition information on food. Like imagine
Bingo.
if you couldn't see the, like
That's
what
it.
the nutrition profile is. Like we ought to start. um I love this idea. We ought to be like, it ought to be like front and center in our minds when we walk into buildings, having awareness of what kind of building we're in related to this profile of. I assume it could be a bunch of metrics that we could
Absolutely. Think
yeah.
about a MLS, a multiple listing service that included how much energy this thing creates, how much energy this thing uses, how much heating costs in the winter, and how much cooling costs in the summer. And you had all this information part of the listing for the house.
Yeah.
And when appraisals are done, that is taken into consideration.
Yeah.
So now you've got incentive to do the right thing, because your house becomes more valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
Well,
is called the carrot.
I love this line of um, inquiry here. And well, here's one reaction I have to it, and that is, um, in Peter Calthorpe's book, talking about the 12% solution. He talks about how there's this notion of green sprawl, which is basically, we're going to keep doing everything that we're currently doing, only we're just going to do it greener. And part of what you said echoes that for me just a little bit. Like we're basically going to keep living in the same kinds of structures, driving the same amount of distances. We're just going to do it in a greener way. We'll electrify our cars, we'll electrify our stoves, and it'll all just be more efficient. But his big point is that we need to go from green sprawl to green urbanism, where we have a much more efficient land use. And so it's not just about the structures we embody in terms of their efficiency, but it's also their proximity to, like being able, 15-minute neighborhoods, for example, being able to walk where you need to go instead of driving everywhere.
Sure.
That
Development
kind
along transit corridors.
For sure. Yeah. So maybe just.
And having that built into a local economy, so that, I mean, your money flows around your 15-minute neighborhood. And it's kind of like the way I conserve energy is the way a walkable community conserves its capital.
Yeah.
Hold on to it as long as you possibly can before you export it to the big bank.
Yep. I like that. Yeah, so that reminds me, you use this phrase, people, planet, profits.
Uh-huh.
So maybe give us a more uh, nuanced, or when you talk about profits, that's often like a swear word, like you're not supposed to talk about profits if you're a good liberal, and
Mm.
maybe you don't think of yourself as a liberal. I don't know.
Well, it depends. I mean,
But
if you're
yeah, it depends on the
neoliberal,
context. Yeah,
if you're neoliberal, that's all there is, I mean,
sure.
yeah.
So yeah, maybe just talk about what that word profit means to you, and in the sense of running a city.
Okay. So I'm actually a Buddhist.
Cool.
And one of the tenets of Buddhism is do no harm. Okay. If you can't do better, the bare minimum is do no harm. So, what you're talking about is reimagining profit as doing no harm. So, what does that mean? That means that we're on a finite planet. How you think we're going to get infinite profit out of a finite planet boggles. I get cognitive dissonance even considering it. So the idea is that an acknowledgement that we live on a finite planet. Think of it as a petri dish, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's just so much medium in the petri dish, and if we extract all of the nutrient, guess what happens?
The petri dish collapses.
It's a collapse, okay?
Yeah.
And we look back in history and we go, look, there's that collapse, there's that collapse, there's that, and do we want to repeat history once again? No. So we need to figure out, if we take, we need to reciprocate. So that profit could be what you give away as much as what you take. So it's
How,
cultural.
how do you ground that into like daily life? I don't that kind of sounds theoretical to me. I don't quite know how to apply it.
Okay, so when we looked at our house, when we decided we wanted to balance the equation so that we took but we returned, our thought process took us to, well, the way power production has traditionally been done is you put panels on your roof, and then they create electricity, which you put out onto the grid. And the input from the grid is what you always had. So you don't know what is coming and where it came from. You know you're putting clean energy out, but you don't know what's coming in. Okay, so for us, totally unacceptable. Okay, so we needed to say, okay, so we have solar panels on our roof. That is creating this thing called direct current electricity. And what we would like to do is, in the morning, the sun comes up, we start to feel the energy being created. What do we do with this energy? So we say, well, okay, are they asking for any? Are they demanding any power in the house? They turned on the range or the microwave or the tea kettle, whatever. if there's low demand and I'm creating more energy than the demand, then do my batteries need to be charged? Okay, so then it's like, okay, it's a game of, if they ask for energy, give it to them. Otherwise, put the surplus into the batteries until the batteries are full. When the batteries are full, you say, okay, batteries full, they're not asking for energy, let's put it out on the grid and give it to somebody. So then your day goes by, and oh, by the way, you kind of start changing your routines to do those expensive things like washing clothes at midday, when you're like creating all sorts of energy. Okay.
Yeah.
So your life changes a little bit, but the other thing that happens is the sun goes down. Okay. And when the sun goes down, you're not creating energy anymore, but you've stored it in your battery. And on kind of this side of the house, everything is kind of still DC until we have a surplus, in which case it gets converted to AC and then it goes out to the grid, right? So at night, the sun goes down and I have to, the house is AC. So I need to convert that stored energy from a battery. It's like your little flashlight battery is DC, right?
Mhm.
So so you convert it to AC and then you use that up, and then you spend the evening burning energy you captured during the day, and in the morning it starts all over again.
It's interesting because I rent a house that's pretty conventional, and I don't have any intention or incentive to like make it carbon neutral or have solar panels. And my routine is kind of flipped, right? We try not to burn energy at 2 p.m. when the AC is running and the grid is working its hardest. We try to do stuff late at night,
Uh-huh.
so it's kind of an
Yeah,
interesting
it
that
is. And
thing.
that's the beauty of what's about to happen. What is about to happen is that the peak of our production is exactly that time.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of there's I've done work with churches, okay, and churches have big, they're trying to heat and cool large spaces. So it is very, very difficult to find a operational church that isn't using big gobs of energy when energy is really at a premium. So what the utilities do is charge you a tariff because you are endangering their ability to give everybody energy
Yeah,
when
to meet demand.
everyone asks for it. Okay, so when you start to talk to them about solarization, what you're really talking about is, we're getting you off of the tariff, and you can now
Interesting.
take that premium that they're charging you and turn it into church programming, which is a much more value to people than
Yeah, climate control.
exporting
Yeah,
it to Minnesota,
yeah,
right? Yeah, so when you think about the city, so I said we want a carbon neutral city. Okay, so part of that carbon neutral city is, we say, well, renewable energy is actually becoming a commodity. Okay, so why would we pay $9,000 a megawatt hour, like during Texas, when we could be getting it for free from our roof? Okay, so so if it's a commodity, then we should be able to go out on the free market and buy energy at the lowest price a supplier is willing to sell it for and still make a profit. So what that would equate to is taking our utility bill for electricity and gas and halving it, paying half as much. So Boulder is in the situation where we are hemorrhaging business because it's cheaper to do business in Longmont or Broomfield or Superior or wherever. Okay, so we're hemorrhaging, that's tax dollars, right? So if we were to go carbon neutral and have our utility cost and provide community broadband, then we have just created a major business magnet that draws the jobs and the business back into Boulder where it used to be.
Well, that's interesting. So I know a lot of people who are concerned about having more housing in town. One of the things that they often say is, well, if we just had a better jobs to housing balance, it would actually be better if we had fewer jobs in town. And so I'm not really a proponent of that. I actually just think we need a lot more housing to house the workers that work here in the city.
We're at about 0.42 right now. There are 0.42 dwellings
per job
for a job.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's something like double. So there's like 40,000 dwellings in Boulder, 40,000 plus, and there's something like 80,000 jobs.
Yeah.
So if we really wanted to, what that tells me is for every property, if you can increase the density double and keep it affordable, then we will achieve that balance. And the 60,000 cars streaming into Boulder could spend the 2 hours they're commuting enjoying life with their families here.
Oh man,
why wouldn't we do this?
Well, because we wouldn't do it because there's a lot of single family homeowners that will be very upset with any proposal that sounds anything like that.
Okay, but what
but
if?
I'm totally for it.
What if?
Just to
What
play
if
my cards.
instead of taxing the building, we tax the land? So if we doubled the density, each of those would pay half as much property tax.
I love that idea. In fact, we need to
is that the carrot or what?
I'm not sure if that's a stick or a carrot, but it's a great idea in my opinion. I love that idea because it's really the land that's so valuable.
Look, you buy, the people from California are coming to Boulder. They're buying these old houses. They're scraping them and putting up these McMansions built, I mean, it's not the building you're buying here.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the land that was colonized.
Yeah, I made that point earlier to someone on Slack today that if you buy a house in Boulder that's $950,000 that you could have paid $150,000 for in Cedar Rapids or Council Bluffs or somewhere. You kind of have the sense that it's not really the house that you're buying.
Yeah.
The house is part of it for sure.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, the land is really valuable, and I feel like we really undervalue the land because we way underutilize it. And
we have to rethink this whole thing. The other thing that's really important about this idea of the missing middle housing is the idea of getting development at a smaller scale. Yeah. So it's not the big construction houses that are doing these mega projects like down at the transportation Boulder Junction. It's the little guys, maybe even the little put some equity into this so that
But you must know this is music to David Adamson's ears, right?
Oh, great.
He loves to I mean
Yeah, we riff.
his
I mean,
yeah, his whole life work right now is trying to figure out how to make gentle infill in the city work so that you could have micro condos in established neighborhoods. And I just think that's such a beautiful approach to include people into our established neighborhoods rather than having, huge I mean, I think density can be really beautiful and really
we can go
pro-social.
both ways.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually can, and along transit corridors, we can do build up, and it'll be fine, right? Yep. It will feel like San Francisco, right?
Yeah,
Or it'll
I
feel
agree.
like France.
Yeah, but I would hate to let you off the hook on just transit corridors, because I feel like when 85% of the city is single family zoned, right? There's a lot of opportunity for infill that's not nearly so dense as, and I like the idea of density on transit corridors, but I also feel like there's a lot of opportunity for more density, gentle density throughout the entire city. And that
I think that's fine, but I think that invites this thing that is menacing, which is parking. So you get off of the transit corridors and suddenly it's like, I got to get in my car to go get a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
And if I got to get in my car and I've doubled my density, then suddenly you have twice as much parking.
Yeah, well, that kind of comes back to my point about green sprawl earlier, and that is we can't really keep doing everything we're doing now and just do it greener. I think we're going to have to, like, as we increase the number of people living in our neighborhoods, decrease the number of cars, and we have to, like, learn how to not drive nearly as much. Like, structure our lives around our 15-minute.
That's a tough nut, dude. That is a tough nut. And I'm all for it. I mean,
I mean, a minute ago you were talking
car about car share, like on your block, there's a car that's available. I mean, that's the David Adamson approach, right?
Yeah.
So, so there are creative ways. I mean, we are such a rich, I mean, in terms of, rich in terms of our ability to be creative. Here in Boulder, we are so intelligent. We may be we may be more intelligent than Berkeley, California. we might be, because of all the science labs that are around here.
I think it's fair to say, we have a lot of creative thinkers, a lot of problem solvers.
It's breathtaking.
Yeah.
And when you set them loose on this kind of thing, it is so surprising. I mean, there are things that you and I will never, ever imagine that our public will latch onto.
Well, I feel like I have a pretty big imagination. and I'm pretty excited about, like, if we can just kind of get started with.
So have you imagined bicycle freeways?
I love that idea.
Have you imagined bicycle freeways?
Well, I guess when I think about 15-minute neighborhoods, the notion of a bicycle freeway doesn't seem super important to me. Like, I don't. In fact,
but if you work downtown.
Yeah, right. Well, and US 36, has something like a bicycle freeway. I don't know if that's what you had in mind, but I've put a lot of miles on that.
No, I'm talking about everything from kids on their little push bikes to state-of-the-art electric bikes, and
Yep.
I don't know if you've noticed the electric skateboards
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
30 miles an hour around town. I
Yeah.
mean, we I'm talking about slow lanes, and I'm talking about really, really fast lanes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm talking about not being on the creek path and hearing on your left, on your right, on your left, on your right, and just, just saying, this is unsafe. This is
Yeah. I
basic.
mean, I agree. So I don't have a car. I bike almost everywhere.
Okay.
My wife does have a car, so I don't want to sound like I'm unfamiliar with cars and I never drive. But
Huh?
she uses the car more than me, and I try to bike as much as I can. And yeah, I love this idea of a bicycle freeway, because one thing I've often said is that Boulder is a very bike friendly town relative to other North American cities. But if you live
It's unsafe
but if you live
for
your life on a
bicycles.
bike, if you live your life on a bike like I do, you realize pretty quickly we are second class citizens, pretty distant.
Absolutely.
This
Yeah.
city is handed over to cars. We make
Yeah.
so much space for them, and,
And
and
we
so
need to, I'm
back to
telling
your
you,
point
we're
about
just
parking.
rethink it.
Yeah, back to your point about parking. I feel like, if you have infill around the city, if you don't change anything else, you could have a lot more parking and a lot of problems with everybody's cars. But I just feel like we have to really like use carrots and sticks to get people out of their cars and restructure our neighborhoods so that we bike and walk most places rather than, like I live in a neighborhood that's close to lots of stuff. I live near Fraser Meadows, and
Okay.
I can walk to Safeway. And I like to point out to people that my neighborhood is walkable, not by design. It's just walkable by proximity.
Okay.
But by design, it's still completely handed over to automobiles. I
Oh,
live on a
yeah.
I live
I
on a
mean,
street
look
that's
how
40
much
feet wide.
building there is versus how much parking there is. And that parking is impermeable. It's like
Oh yeah,
we get a hard rain, and that is all water that has to go somewhere, right?
yeah,
So we really need to rethink the whole deal. That Meadows um, shopping area, any of the shopping areas, you look at the buildings versus parking, and you just say, this is insane.
yeah.
And
Well,
you
and
know,
that
I
one in
think
particular,
you should get a credit for not having a parking place. I mean, talk about negawatts.
yeah,
Someone's got to
yeah.
pay to maintain those
Empty
parking
parking lots.
lots.
Yeah, I sometimes joke there's only one thing that makes me more upset than a full parking lot, and that is an empty one. And
Yeah,
the
yeah.
that parking lot at the Meadows Center, I have never seen it close to capacity. You go there
So
at
check this one out.
the busiest time of the year, it's still at 50% at most.
Check this one out. Imagine that you own a church and you've got this big
I,
parking lot
I'm like a
that
cult
is
leader.
used one morning a week.
Yeah,
Okay. And the rest of the time, what does it do? It heats cars,
yeah.
right? So,
It heats the earth, captures sunlight, and heats up,
and
bakes
sheds
our city.
water and does all
Yeah,
sorts of bad things. What if we reimagined church parking lots as affordable housing, like
man, you
attention homes?
I love it. You're talking my language here, because I actually want to do an episode about this subject. Just. In fact, I've started going around town
In fact, you
taking.
should invite me to that episode,
Okay,
because
I will be.
I will amaze you.
That's great. I want to talk more about this. I've actually started going around the city, taking photos of empty parking lots, in particular church parking lots, because I feel like, man,
What a
that's like
waste.
well, also what an opportunity, right? Like
Oh
that
yeah.
there's we just talked about how land is so valuable, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's
This is
underutilized.
the deal about churches. They're poor, um, money wise, but they're rich property wise, and
Yes.
they have an exceptional tax
Well,
situation.
and I think churches in society at large, I don't want to pick on any specific church, but they
But
they're
go
they're
ahead.
they're they're struggling with relevance, right?
Oh yeah.
A lot of people
Well,
just
not only of that,
are not going.
they're
And so I'm
struggling with shrinking membership
yeah, yeah,
because we're all dying off on them.
yeah. So I just think
Okay.
I think
So
that
this
yeah,
is
if a
revenue
church
stream.
yeah, if we could encourage churches to convert half their parking lot to affordable housing,
Oh my
what a
gosh.
positive way to
And
improve.
then you've got these people that have maybe nothing better to do on Sunday morning but to come over and
Just
schmooze
walk
with
over. Yeah,
your congregation. I mean,
that's right.
you know,
Let's find out about these nice people who build
and
my affordable housing.
it slots extremely well with the faith values of charity and compassion.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so you got the whole tamale here. And there's something else that's really cool. The churches have the ability, there's something called the Religious Land Use and something Persons Act. I'll remember what the I is. But anyway, what it says is churches are a community asset. If churches want to develop their land and it furthers their faith values, then they get a hall pass on zoning.
Cool.
Oh, dude.
um, I love that. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I think maybe they should still have to, speak with the planning board, but
Well,
I think
but they get a hall pass,
yeah.
and the city knows it.
Grace Lutheran Church downtown is making big plans to
Oh
add
yeah, I mean
affordable housing.
they're knocking it out of the park.
Yeah. So I hope
Yeah,
if you're on city council, you won't get in the way of uh, that kind of work. God's work,
heavens
so to
no,
speak. Yeah.
I'm gonna be encouraging it.
Yeah. Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I have this little thread that feels loose that I wanted to circle back on, if you don't mind. You were talking about you posed this question of how can you have infinite profits on a finite planet?
Okay.
And I love that question because it's sort of it's sort of absurd, the economic model we have, where it's like we expect the markets, all the markets, to keep growing exponentially
Mhm.
for the into the future. And that seems unrealistic and
It
not
seems like
even
a recipe for collapse to
a
me.
recipe for collapse. But one answer to answer the actual question is to put more value on our social connections, on our spirituality, on our the soft touch things that aren't stuff, and so for me,
Community.
our community, yeah. So I
To
mean,
me, it's all about community.
when you think about how impoverished we are as a society in terms of like the isolation and the mental health,
Mhm.
if you just think about prosperity in terms of mental health,
Mhm.
then we have so much room for for wonderful
Yeah,
growth,
yeah.
you know. And I
I'm
think
gonna
that
share
goes.
something with you.
Go ahead.
Um, Paradise Built in Hell. Have you heard of Paradise Built in Hell?
No, I
So,
love the name though. It's very
okay,
provocative.
Rebecca Solnit writes this book, and it opens with the earthquake in 1906 in San Francisco, and the city's on fire. The people are out in the street, and suddenly they're being very civil to each other because that's all they've got. All they've got is each other. So, what we're really talking about is community,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, in the end. And that community, when our house burned to the ground in 2010, the the people of Boulder, there were 170 families that lost their homes in the 4 Mile Canyon wildfire. The good people of Boulder spontaneously said, these people need our help. We are going to take an empty office supply building down on East Pearl, and we're going to turn it into a drop-off point where you can drop off the kinds of things that people that have lost everything are going to need, like towels, like blankets, like plates, like silverware, like glasses, like just furniture. And they did this spontaneously. This is what community looks like. Okay. And end of the day, that's what we are building. Okay. So give it all these fancy names, give it a job housing ratio, but really what you're building is you're building a healthy, resilient, caring, dignified community.
Well, I really appreciate that. Um, we're also kind of bipolar on this issue because we really have inclusive sensibilities. We want to be a welcoming place that's, not racist, not homophobic or xenophobic,
And yet we displace our working middle.
And yet we displace, we displace the working middle. And so I love this idea of community and inclusiveness, but it isn't really in tension with the exclusivity of the really, in my opinion, like the land use policies and the housing policies that really keep people out. So
my answer to that is climate change and things like COVID are equitable. It doesn't matter how much money you have. When the power goes out and the water stops flowing, you are as susceptible to a bad time, and you are actually more susceptible to not having the services that you are accustomed to. There's this thing that happened in Chicago that just changed. It was like standing in your front yard and watching a major fire unfold. You realize my life will never be the same. Well, I think that we're going to be facing major heat waves the way the Northwest faced them. It's just a matter of time. Okay. And are we prepared? I don't think so. No. Okay. So I started studying heat waves and what happened. And so there was a heat wave in 1995 in Chicago. It was like 4 days over 100 degrees. And things just started, it was just like this
the city's melting.
Rube Goldberg downward spiral, okay? But they did a study afterward and, they found, okay, yeah, the rich people did, pretty okay. But the Chicano communities actually outperform the rich people. So how does that happen? Well, the way it happens is they are challenged every day of their lives. So they have built that social capital that you're talking about. They knew where the old people that couldn't take care of themselves were, and they made sure that they were taken care of and that they were brought out of their homes and made comfortable in the streets. And so this to me was eye-opening, because when the flood happened, it didn't matter how much money your house was worth, right? Your house washed away no matter how much you had in the bank. So in my mind, what we're facing looking forward are great equalizers. So community then becomes really important. So you have, how are you going to do when you can't flush your toilet? You're going to be like those homeless people that are in the encampment that don't have a toilet. So our disdain for their lack of hygiene, it's going to visit us.
Well, that disdain is also like the flip side of our fear.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, we are unprepared. We are as unprepared for homelessness as the homeless are that are in those camps.
Yeah.
And we're going to find that out when the services start failing us. And think about Louisiana right now. They're finally getting power, 5 days after? And some of them, it will be months.
Yep.
Okay. And imagine your life without power for 2 months.
Yeah. No, it's that would make it difficult for me to work from home,
It would make a lot of things difficult.
Well, so I guess, I mean, our response to that is we need to build robust, diverse, inclusive communities that
Are resilient.
that are resilient.
Well,
Absolutely.
yes. And
Yeah.
and you know what? I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only would I agree with you, I am going to work at encouraging that, because it is the right thing. And we constantly think of these problem populations as problems, but at a certain point they could become assets because they know how to survive.
Yeah. Diversity is not a touchy-feely, feel-good sort of thing. It's really essential for survival and for resilience in the face of all the possible calamities that can.
And that other thing that happens, that other, I mentioned it, and I think the filter took over. It's kindness.
Yeah.
It's like after a major disruption like an earthquake, a heat wave, this, that, and the other, there's this kindness that makes community glow. And we actually don't need the bad thing to happen to make the kindness glow.
No, I think we need better structures that bring us to pro-social structures
I
that
think
bring
we
us
need
together.
leadership that values it.
Yeah, that too, for sure. Beautiful.
I am really enthusiastic about getting some fresh air onto city council.
Yeah,
and to create that diverse mix of perspectives, but more than that, infuse a attitude of deep respect for differing opinion, and to try to our first attempt should be to create bridges over divides rather than stronger walls.
Amen.
Yeah. And we can do this, just got to get the phony divisiveness and turn it into kindness, and we can do this.
Well, we have to, because we have a climate crisis
Well, yeah,
breathing down our necks.
absolutely. And yeah, I'm one that really believes in the precautionary principle, which is if it is at all possible, you have to expect that it will happen. And yeah, I think we're a generation that is actually, we may be the first generation that's turning over a worse planet than what we were given.
Yeah.
And that is really wrong. And that is burdening coming generations. And the last thing I want is the unborn to look back and say, wow, what a bunch of chumps. Ask yourself when that, if you're lucky enough to have that grandchild on your knee, what you're going to tell them. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's good. That's a good principle to live by.
And Philip, I'm so grateful for the work you do. And say hello to David.
Okay.
For me. And again, if
That
you
was
want to have further conversations, again, we just
great. Yeah,
we haven't
thank
gotten
you.
we haven't gotten hardly anywhere.
I would love to do that. Thank you. It was such an interesting and thought-provoking conversation. I got totally wrapped up in it. So really, it was great to get to know you better as a person, as a candidate. I wish you all the best of luck in the fall. The weeks and months you have coming up until November. So I hope that all works out well for you.
Okay, man.
Okay, peace.
Thank you.
This episode of Sharing Boulder was produced by David Adamson and Philip Ogren. Sound and video editing was done by Philip Ogren. The intro music was sampled from Osladum by Gilberto Gil and is available for use under the Creative Commons Sampling Plus license. Please visit us at sharingboulder.us for show notes and previous episodes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please support us by sharing this episode with your friends and family. Keep sharing, Boulder.